Make sure everything's working this time. So what happened is I was trying to stream at exactly 2, and then my audio started breaking down. So make sure everything's working this time. So okay. I was trying to. So my audio's working on my phone. So yeah, I was trying to stream at exactly 2, and my audio wasn't going through. I don't know what the problem was. I just restarted my computer and it worked. So here we are with My Words Black, Making Magic, September 15th, 2025 by Mark Rosewater. So unlike Blue and White, I have not gotten around to finishing my the article of Black. So I don't have like a list of like the flavor reasons for that they give Black certain mechanics. I know some off the top of my head, and also I have like written about Black tangentially by virtue of I have more specific articles. Like I talk about how colors manifest on specific planes. I've talked about Kamigawa, etc., etc. Black connection to vampires and zombies. So it's not like I don't know anything about Black. I do know stuff. I just haven't put it all into words and have like a because part of the reason I make the articles is for people to read it, but also so I have like a neat and tidy place where all my thoughts are. So if I ever I'm trying to remember exactly what I'm trying to say in like a well spoken way, I will like go back to like my previous articles and just quote those. Hold on, let me show chat there. So hello everyone. This is Magic Color. This is Magic Color Black. Mark, the author of this column, is doing I should probably. I'll post this on Reddit after I finish. Mark, the author of this column, is doing a 5-article series that he's calling My Words, where he's giving a bunch of Magic colors an article to allow us to talk directly to all of you and give first-hand accounts of our philosophies. This is based on a series he did for his podcast, Drive to Work. Sorry, I said it like that because that's how he says like on the. It's time for another drive to work. White and blue have already gone, so today it is my turn. One of the reasons I want to write this article is that I believe, of the 5 colors of magic, I'm the most misunderstood. People seem to want to ascribe nefarious motives to what I want, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So what exactly do I want? Put simply, I want every person to have the opportunity to thrive. I have no expectation that every person will thrive. In fact, I know objectively that most won't. I just want those who work hard dedicate themselves to a better life to have the chance to do so. I'm just gonna make sure everything's working on the stream. Okay, so Black being one of the misunderstood colors is probably correct. It's a bit complicated because I think to a certain point, I would say Black is the most misunderstood. I'd say Black and White both are extremely misunderstood because people boil it down to good versus bad. And to be fair, I suppose from White's perspective, that is what White wants you to think. That White is good generally. So in that regard, you could say Black is the most misunderstood because Black is not just evil, and it's to portray it as evil is kind of like incorrect. And White isn't good or evil either. White, all the colors are inherently neutral. White, yes, believes in an objective morality and goodness, but doesn't mean White is always doing the right thing, or is not evil or doing things under the veil of like supposed goodness. But at least with White, with the misunderstanding, it's like portraying White as like in a really positive light. With Black, it's portraying it as a really negative light. I believe Mark also said green is one of the most misunderstood colors. Well, I guess he said more specifically, it's like people just straight up like don't understand green, what green's about. Like they're just confused by it. Where Black people just think they misattribute Black to just being evil. Of the 5 magic colors, I am the most pragmatic. I mean, every color is the most pragmatic to an extent. But no. But yeah, that's the Black school. I see the world as it is, a harsh place where many suffer as a result. People are fundamentally selfish, but I don't see that as a bad thing. Everyone deserves someone to look out for them, and only you can only truly look out for yourself. No one else sees the world as you do. No one else has your best interests at heart, and no one will fight for you like you will. My biggest problem with selfishness is that the world has all these negative connotations. Largely thanks to magic color White. Something that looking out for yourself or prioritizing your own needs is bad. And to extrapolate on this point a little bit, Black is not. People also associate Black as being like this completely lone wolf color at all times that never ever wants to work with someone and like has no friends and says like you should just be like have no friends, have no one you trust. Black at the end of the day is just saying you should put yourself first and foremost and look out for yourself as much as possible. Black is not saying you can't have friends or family or people you care about or people you'll go to bat for. Black is just saying if you have to choose between those people and yourself, you should choose yourself. And part of the reason, too, is because Black is like, hey, if you take care of yourself, you'll have more power to do what you want anyway. So Black is sort of like, if I help myself now, then later down the line, I might be able to help my friends anyway. Um, if it cares that much, it depends. Um, and I think also there's like this idea that black is like anti-society. Like black and red are like anarchists at all times. And that can sometimes be them, but that's not all those colors are, especially black. Black actually does strongly believe in specific systems, specifically like meritocracies, merit-based systems, where it's like if you can live, if you can survive, if you can do whatever it takes to survive, you get what you deserve. Where white ones like balance things out, where everyone gets like has like a a baseline that they like human rights, everything that everyone deserves. Black is just saying like you know, black believes that like in a white. So for example, group project, right? White would say that in a group project, you're getting graded as a group because you're all supposed to be working together. Black might say, no, I'm grading you individually because I want to reward the individual for doing their job. Um, and also like from a certain perspective, like you know, so certain colors are gonna like draw a distinction between like society as a whole and like individual people sometimes. And from Black's perspective, I suppose Black sees them as like more one and the same because at the end of the day, what's society made of? Is made of people. So if every person looks out for themselves and does what's best for themselves, then it's gonna average out to being what's best for society. Um, of course, it's like Black's view. I'm not saying like it's an objectively correct view with any of the colors. When I go over any of the colors, I'm not saying it's like always objectively the correct view. I'm just saying that's how the colors like are interpreting the world around them. So, Agents of the Fates. One generic, two black. Creature, human assassin. Death touch. Heroic. When you cast a spell that targets Agents of Fates, each opponent sacrifices a creature. You are breathing borrowed air. 3/2. So one thing that you see a lot like in black, blue, and green is like the idea of fate. And I think people sometimes end up not understanding the nuances of why they care about fate and just end up conflating all these like three colors about in relation to fate, where they think all these colors believe in fate and all these colors adhere to a fate. So green believes in that if there is a fate, you shouldn't try to change it or that you can't change it. Green is like you should accept your fate and you should not fight it. Black and blue are both enemies of colors. I mean, enemies of green. The reason they care about fate is the idea that you can control your fate. You can subvert fate. You have your say over your fate. That we are all born blank slates or near blank slates and have control over ourselves and what we can be. Green is like there's a limit to how much you can change. Like if you're born to fly, you're born to fly. Not if you're not born with wings, there's only so much you can do to fly, right? But blue and black are like I'm gonna find a way to fly. I can build wings or a plane or something like that. Aggressive negotiations. Two generic, one black. Sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature you control. Also, once again, black has like a lot of sacrifice effects and destroys. Like doing whatever it takes to win. So like one of the colors that's least likely to shy away from death and killing to get what it wants. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature you control. When an alliance outlasts its usefulness, it's best to end it quickly. Hang Sultai Ambassador. So once again, I know this is like literally like portraying a betrayal, but once again we have an example of like black being willing to work with people to get what it needs. And one thing that black can do is also like discard and exile cards from your hand, which is like the idea of so black is allied colors with blue, so it's the idea of also depriving knowledge in a sense, where like one of the best ways to fight someone is by if they don't even know you're there or what you're planning, then you have to jump on them. But also like black is also willing to cross lines that other colors will not, so it's willing to like mess with your head a little bit more in certain ways. Grave Endeavor, 5 generic, 2 black. Instant. Roll 2d10 and choose one result. Return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to that result. Then each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the result. Not alive, not dead, but definitely furious. So, another example of black being like black's ruthlessness is the idea that it can drain life. It will make the opponent lose life and gain life by sucking the life out of you. And also bringing stuff back from the graveyard. So other colors can bring stuff back from the graveyard sometimes, but there's usually stronger limitations on it. For example, white can only bring like small creatures below either a certain mana value or a certain like power and toughness from the battlefield, from the graveyard back to the battlefield. And green is a bit more limited. It's usually like lands and stuff and like specific instances. But black leans most heavily into graveyard recursion because it's like the idea that where other colors might be afraid to desecrate the dead or mess with like rotting corpses and stuff or stuff that could be harmful or immoral, black is like the most likely to just use that as a resource. Harsh scrutiny. one black. Sorcery. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a creature card from it. That player discards that card. Scry 1. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. Enforcer Chief Ranage. So once again, black does have like an emphasis on knowledge sometimes, like blue. And the idea that you can deprive someone of knowledge to gain an advantage. Yawgmoth's Will. Two generic, one black. Sorcery. Until end of turn, you may play cards in your graveyard as though they were in your hand. Cards put into your graveyard this turn are removed from the game instead. So basically, it's a fancy way of saying you can play cards from your graveyard, and also when a card would be put into your graveyard, it's exiled instead. So once again, black is playing into the graveyard theme. The idea that it won't shy away from using the dead as a resource. My worldview is that everyone deserves to be their own champion. If someone is willing to do what it takes to thrive, they should have the opportunity to do so. I believe in a merit-based system. People's fates rise and fall with their accomplishments. So once again, like I was saying earlier, black is not like completely like some sort of like anarchist. Well, I'm maybe using the term anarchist wrong there. Like anarchist not in the political sense, but anarchist in the sense that there should be like no structure whatsoever or no like. So people have this idea like I don't know, black is like anti-society or something, or like Lamau, I'm the Joker baby. But black can believe in like a certain. The thing about all the colors have like certain social structures that can appeal to them, that exist beyond just I want to destroy society and I want us to just do whatever we want with no like sort of rules or limitations. So black does believe there should be rules and limitations sometimes. It's just that it has a different idea of what that means in comparison to white. I also believe that not everyone will succeed, and that's okay. It's not your job to worry about the suffering of others. You should focus on yourself. If they fall short, stumble, or need your help, that's not your problem. It's theirs. Some hear this and ask about loved ones and friends. If you have the means to help those who are important to you, you can, and should do that provided it doesn't conflict with your own needs, which is exactly what I was talking about earlier. There's this idea that black is like a lone wolf and is like saying you shouldn't have friends. Black is not saying that. Black is just saying white might say, hey, if forced between choose between your friends and your loved ones and yourself, maybe prioritize your friends and loved ones, and then they can take care of you in turn. Black is saying there's no guarantee they will be able to take care of you in turn, so focus on yourself if possible. It's like being on a sinking ship. You're of no use to anyone if you don't put on your own life vest first. You do what you need to do to survive and thrive. That means capitalizing on your advantages, using your resources and prioritizing yourself. The biggest problem most people have is their willingness to capitalize on opportunity. I think most people run their lives based on fear. Opportunities present themselves and people opt not to take them because they're worried about what might happen. They do this for many reasons. Whether they're afraid of failure, worried that it would change the status quo, or are apprehensive at the prospect of doing something they're not supposed to. Humans come up with so many reasons not to do things that fundamentally they know they want to do. You should believe that you're worthy of being the best, of doing the best, and having the best. And yes, taking a risk comes with taking chances. But you know what comes with taking chances? With not taking chances? Failure. Look at every successful person and you will see a trend. They're willing to do things that others aren't. I'm not talking about being reckless. I'm talking about being careful and methodical in what choices you're making. I'm talking about being ruthless in pursuit of excellence. It's important to keep in mind that life is a zero-sum game. If you're gaining something, someone else is losing it. What I mean by that is gain inherently comes with loss. You should take no shame in acquiring things where there are winners. You should take no shame in acquiring things. Where there are winners, there are also losers. But that's okay. They earned it. They were able to do something better than someone else. You can apply that same line of thinking to work. When you get a job, you earn it. Nobody else gets that job. When you acquire a resource, money, status, influence, someone else misses out because you earned it instead. Life's about taking those opportunities and doing so without remorse. Don't be sad for the players that didn't get the trophy, the people that didn't get the job, or the individuals that didn't get the resource. They didn't get them because they weren't as good as you. So that's a little harsh, but I think I really like this article more than some of Mark's previous articles because I think sometimes Mark does have a good understanding of the color pie. I'm not saying he's wrong, but in some of the previous articles, I felt like he kind of like drummed up the like black as like a sort of like murder, I'll kill to get what I want a little bit too much, to the point where it's like I feel like if you're a new player, you just read that and like, oh, black loves murder, black's the murder color. And yes, black has a lot of kill effects. Black is the most willing to do whatever it takes to win, including killing people. But it's like reducing it to just, oh, it's the murder color is kind of reductive sometimes, in my opinion, because like other colors do kill for like different reasons. Obviously, like mechanically, like white does destroy creatures. Red has ways of like just dealing damage so you die. But white's gonna usually try to put like a moral spin on it. Like I did it in self-defense. I did it for the greater good. Black is usually gonna do it for it's gonna be like I did it to gain power or to gain a step and like move up the ladder, etc. And even then, I think some people sometimes take the mechanics too literally. Like they'll, because like okay, so there are old blue cards that do actually destroy things and like replace them or just destroy stuff. But it's important to understand that I think every color characters in any color can kill people for like different. But the reasoning will just usually be different. Um, like yes, there is a version of a white character that's like pacifist and will not kill no matter what. But you can also have white characters like I will kill in self defense, and that's like a valid white alignment interpretation of white that does not contradict with like the core philosophy of the white color alignment. Um, Blasphemous Edict. 3 generic, 2 black. Sorcery. You may pay 1 black rather than the spell's mana cost. If there are 13 or more creatures on the battlefield, so also 13. So I think this is probably one of the Innistrad cards or something. But some of the Innistrad cards have like a gimmick, or there's some cards in other places, but they're mostly on Innistrad, where it's like if you have 13 of something, it's some special effect because 13 is an unlucky number. Each player sacrifices 13 creatures of their choice. A demonic pact is all fun and games until the bill comes due. Liliana Vess. Speaking from experience, I suppose. Um, so one thing also you get a lot in black is also, besides sacrifice, is like fear. So menace as a mechanic, but also literally there's a fear mechanic that is no longer in use. But also sacrifice like 13 is a number that's deemed unlucky, and some people even have like a phobia of the number 13. And it's not necessarily representative of black being afraid per se. It's more so that black is willing to use fear as like a tool, the most out of any color, aside from maybe red, because red is a leans hard into emotion, using emotions to get what you want. But black is like the idea is that black's willing to use like things that have bad imagery or create fear to get what it wants or sway people in certain ways. Corrupt Conviction, 1 black, instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature. Every moving character is an accident waiting to happen, and the Hellspurs hate waiting. So once again, the idea that black is willing to, so black and white both have like a lot of sacrifice effects to an extent, but with white the flavor is usually that it's like a noble sacrifice. You're willing to, like a creature willing to sacrifice itself for the sake of what you want to do or for the greater good. For black, it's like the idea that like these are like your cronies and you're just sacrificing them because you want to win the game. You're doing whatever it takes to win, which means sacrificing the people working for you sometimes or taking acceptable losses. And that's one thing I think is reflected very well in Magic. Is generally like the colors all want you to play a certain way, and this usually hints at kind of like what their philosophy is. Like blue wants you to play slow and methodical, and a bit control-y or tempo-y. Red wants you to like you want to win. What's the fastest way to win? Deal damage, run in, swing, hit people. So you want to win? I'm gonna create the most straightforward path for you to win. White wants to play slow, build its numbers, work as a group to take down a foe. Green, it probably has like the most disconnect between its like mechanics and like philosophy, but the idea is still there. Like it's heavily reliant on creatures, i.e., using what your mama gave you, not relying too much on like certain forms of artifice. And then black, of course, is the idea that you should be doing whatever it takes to win. And black has so many like sacrifice effects that if you're playing black, like mono black, and you're not willing to sacrifice creatures or let them die to get what you want, then you're shooting yourself in the foot in most cases, and you're gonna have a lot harder time trying to win. So black is like, hey, if you want to win, you have to be willing to make sacrifices. Ego Drain, 1 black. Sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. If you don't control a fairy, exile a card from your hand. So once again, discard, messing with the mind. You've wasted your life. Let's see if I can do any better with it. Grave Titan, 4 generic, 2 black. Creature, Titan, Death Touch. So also black has like Death Touch because it's willing to use poisons and willing to kill you. Poison that others might see like as immoral or underhanded. But black is like, hey, winners write history, so who cares if it's underhanded as long as you win. Of course, green also gets Death Touch, but green it's mostly like referencing like the fact that some animals are naturally venomous, and green cares a lot about creatures. So whenever Grave Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, put two black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield. Death in form and function. So also, I know this is like a giant, but also black can take a lot of zombies because I think certain creature types are in their colors not because necessarily that creature would like follow that, subscribe to that color philosophy, but it's something that the color itself was more likely to make use of and use to their advantage. For example, zombies that can sometimes be like more complex, like liches or someone who otherwise keeps their mental faculties. But usually zombies are quite mindless. But the idea is that black is one of the colors most willing to use zombies in most cases. The idea that black is willing to use necromancy to resurrect like a shambling horde, and then not only does it have like this sort of like pestilence disease factor, like biological warfare, but also like a mental factor where it's like you could be fighting your own loved ones. And those are also things that black might lean into as a way to win a battle. Um, Black also gets like a lot of rats, and once again, I don't think rats are like inherently. I don't think Magic is trying to argue that rats are like inherently black aligned. What it's trying to say is that black is the most willing to color to is the color most willing to use the imagery of rats and the fear they invoke to win a fight, and also like a bit of biological warfare, I guess. I think rats get a bad rap for that sometimes, but live or die. 3 generic, 2 black. Instant. Choose one. Return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Destroy target creature. So yeah, resurrection or destroying. I grant them illusion of hope, so that their despair grows even sweeter. Vagavoth. I believe that the ultimate goal of any individual should be reaching the point where they can do whatever they want to do. A person should strive to be able to make anything happen if they want it to happen. You have the means to live your life on your own terms. You can call it whatever you like: success, achievement, personal growth. Personally, I like to call it power. Most people won't get the level of power that I strive for. Power is for a select few. Part of success involves dealing with the fact that you succeeded where others failed, but their failure is not your concern. So how exactly is one supposed to get power? I'll be gracious and share some secrets with you. Just remember my role in helping you. First, you have to figure out what you want. A lot of people fail at this. They wander around aimlessly and are unsure of what their future entails. The key to success is focus. There's no way to accomplish anything if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish. I suggest choosing something that is valuable to you. It can be a thing, a person, a position, or an accolade. It should be something that improves your life. So already you can see something that like where blue and black overlap a bit, where blue and black both have this massive theme of self-improvement. And here you're saying black is basically saying pick something, and then you're trying to improve yourself so you can get to that point. And this is something that blue and black overlap on. Now the difference is that black is a little bit more focused on power, and blue thinks that blue can see that as like a little bit like narrow of a view of what it means to improve yourself. And sometimes improving yourself can mean, making yourself more useful to other people, but it's still there. Like the idea that, where white's improvement of society in general, black is improvement of the self, and then blue's like, I want to improve everything, so I get along with white and black because they both have something they want to improve. Second, figure out why exactly you have to do what exactly you have to do to acquire that valuable thing. Make a list. Write down the steps you would need to take. Be exhaustive. And if you're not sure what exactly the steps are, write down every possible step you can think of. What is everything? And I truly mean everything that you could do to get what you desire. What is everything? And I truly mean everything that you could do to get what you desire. A big reason for failure is a lack of insight. Success comes from exploring your options. So once again, we have a little bit of overlap between black and blue. This emphasis on the idea of information and trying to sit there and like calculate all the possible routes you could take and why knowledge is so important. There's also like a bit of overlap between black and white a little bit, where it's like this idea of white and black both wanting to be a bit more methodical and consider all the options they're making and how it has like big like ramifications down the line. Of course, black and white are overall enemies, but we'll get to that in a second because I can see the white cards down here. Third, figure out what obstacles come with each step. What's in your way? Is it a person, a set of rules, your own internal reluctance? What would stop you from acquiring that step? This is another big hurdle to success, an unwillingness to properly gauge your obstacles. Gauge your obstacles. Fourth, make a list of every resource you currently have access to. This is the area where most people fall short. Many people don't succeed because they're unwilling to do what it takes to achieve their goals. What tools are available to you? You need to be creative and ruthless. There is one more step, and it is, in some ways, the simplest and hardest step. Use all the resources available to you, step 4, to overcome the obstacles. Step 3, to do the things you need to do. Step 2, to get the things you want. Step 1. Lather, rinse, repeat. Each step will get you closer to your goal. Just keep focused, follow the plan, and do whatever it takes. Will there be risks? Yes. Will there be sacrifices? Most likely. Will you have to do things that will make others think badly of you? Probably. But who cares? And there is like a little bit of like beauty to that in a way. I mean, this is all like kind of morbid. But in like a very depressing view of the world in a certain ways. But there's kind of like a beauty to that where it's like there's always gonna be at least one person who hates you no matter what you do. So you might as well like just do whatever it takes, that whatever makes you happy and whatever it takes for you to win, right? If you do what needs to be done and get the things that matter, you will acquire power. You will control your destiny. You will be your own champion. So once again, black and blue both agree in this idea of controlling your own destiny, that you have a say in what that is. Where green and white are more like there's certain things that you cannot change or that you should accept, and that we have to live with that. So normally I read the art before I like right after this, but the order swaps where Mark puts the images before what he's talking about this time. So I'm gonna read what's under the cards and then go back and look at the card, why he picked the 5 cards. I'll now talk about your greatest challenges, which I will use as a means of discussing each of the other colors. I will start with one of my enemy colors, white. White is a master of convincing people to act against their own interests. White is very good at selling people on the idea that what they want is not what they need. I'll admit, I don't understand why that rhetoric works, but I'm kind of jealous. This is a huge thorn in my side. Playing to people's self-interest is powerful and effective. When people stop prioritizing their own needs, it becomes a lot harder to sway them to my side. So this is one thing I've talked about previously, is that what's very interesting about the colors is that you might think it's contradictory. Like, for example, blue loves depriving people of knowledge sometimes. You might say, hey, that's contradictory because blue wants to share knowledge and blue cares about knowledge so much and doesn't want to lose it. And to an extent, that's true. But because blue emphasizes knowledge so much and how knowledge can is the ultimate form of power, it will attack. It thinks the best way to take care of your enemies is to deprive them of knowledge. So this is something you see with all the other colors. Since the colors have a certain worldview, their worldview dictates how they approach a lot of situations. So because white, for example, cares about the greater good and the group good of the people and society at large, usually it's going to use large numbers and then work with within society to take down the group, another group in itself, as opposed to just individual people. Black is all about caring about yourself, selfishness. You should put yourself first. So because of that, when black is dealing with other people and other forces, it will try to appeal to their sense of what they want individually, what they personally want, or try to take them out individually. And so for example, if it wants sow dissent amongst the group, it might go hey, you want some money? Because I know you personally need or want this money to do what you want. But, someone who's heavily white aligned might go I'm willing to sacrifice what I want to do what the group needs. And that makes, black's hold less effective in a way, or black's way of thinking or stratagem, because black is banking on you acting selfishly at the end of the day. White has this whole good of the group scam they run. It's based on the idea that if everyone gives up any hope of being happy, they can be less miserable. It is an admirable con. The dangerous part of selling everyone on the scam is a concept called morality, which is the idea that certain things are quote-unquote good and others quote-unquote evil. Conveniently, whatever white does is good and whatever I do is evil. Again, morality is just a made-up story that white tells to get people to act against their own interest. So once again, I want to emphasize the fact that we are reading these articles from the perspective of whatever color is speaking. So it's going to be biased against white in this article. If you want a more white perspective on what's happening or how the world works, go back to my stream where I'm reading the white, in my words, white article, or any of Mark's articles where he's talking about white specifically. It's just a little disclaimer I always have to put where it's hey, this is from the perspective of black, so white and green are going to get slandered a little bit, and that's okay because it shows Mark has a good understanding of how the colors view each other. Through a combination of fear and guilt, white manipulates people into not just believing their phony ideas, but also framing me as a villain. This makes it harder to accomplish my goals and creates endless headaches. The key to fighting this involves leaning into the knowledge that people are inherently selfish. White can fool them, but when you offer people things they secretly desire, you can overwrite a lot of programming. I do respect white's ability to organize, and I have been able to co-opt many of white's creations, like law and religion, to bend them to my own needs. White is very effective at making tools, and again, it's not hard to admire the brainwashing white is able to do. So, I did mention I did talk about white a little bit. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but so one thing white and black do overlap in is the idea of structure and how their willingness, because black is willing to use whatever it takes to win, which includes it's willing to resort to structures to subjugate its enemies and stay ahead. And this can be seen in factions like the Orzhov, for example, where it's Orzhov are very black's goal of winning money and power and using white means of controlling the populace and maintaining your power. White and black also have themes of sacrifice. I mentioned earlier, white's the idea of being willing to sacrifice yourself for the greater good or other people, and black is willing to sacrifice others to get what it wants or needs. So when you have a white black deck, you have this, it's black I'm willing to sacrifice whoever, and then a bunch of people lining up and saying we're white aligned, we're willing to sacrifice ourselves for your goals. And black is great, jump into that monster. But they also have life game, but that's mostly white's healing, and then black's life drain. Um, there's also like this idea of self improvement. So, like I said, blue and black have have a big emphasis overlap on self improvement, and there's a bit of that, and also like white and black, what's the idea that improving yourself on the individual level can make you more useful for the greater good, for like the group as a whole. So that sometimes does happen, where it's like this idea of like if I improve myself or gain enough power, I can help people later or use that power for good. Because white, it's like white can does have like a concept of like power can be used for good. Like you can have a ton of power and use it for good things. And I would actually argue that with great power comes great responsibility is a very white aligned quote. For example, the idea that those with power should be using to help other people, and putting other people first. Adamant Will, one generic, one white, instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains indestructible until end of turn. I refuse to die before I see the sun rise again. So white gains indestructible. I mean, right, white has a lot of indestructible effects. Just the idea of like helping, just like helping people, protecting people. Um, White usually has like does have like +1/+1 and +2/+2. It really gets +3/+3 and above. That's usually just the idea that white usually is about going wide and focusing on smaller creatures. So it's the idea that white wants you to go as wide as possible to rely on as many people as possible, and not just like one really big, powerful person or creature. And this is a time where I mentioned like power, toughness, and power. So everyone makes jokes about like power and toughness, so where it's like, hey, 10 scrolls can beat like a fucking primordial like entity. There's like the art Alara color equals Rebirth. So you have the joke that, like, for example, Progenitus is like this nigh this nigh primordial entity of like every color can be beaten by like 10 1/1 squirrel tokens. And that is funny and true, and part of that's just the limitation of the game. But sometimes power and toughness is more like metaphorical, where it's like the creature being 1/1 is not saying it's literally weak, but the idea that maybe it isn't willing to go all out all the time or willing to use its power, or that it just wants you, it's just trying to encourage you to just be reliant on like more than one person, to be reliant on the group. Like it, like no, like a creature might be low power, like not because it couldn't like be a 10/10 like lore wise, but because like I'm trying to get you to rely on like to see my philosophy and rely on like working together with people. Like I'd rather work together with people than just try to like solo everything on my own. Um, Collective effort. One generic, two white. Sorcery. Escalate. Tap an untapped creature you control. When you think about it, it's kind of like no. Waterbending cares about artifacts. Choose one or more. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. So white does get like white and black both get destroy stuff, but usually white tends to be more specific, where white will destroy a target attacking or blocking creature or a creature above a certain like power, like 4 specifically. And that I think just represents the idea that white, if something is too big or too powerful, or is attacking you or blocking you or getting in your way, it becomes a threat, and then becomes morally justified to like destroy that threat. Um, Destroy target enchantment. Also, white gets like a lot of enchantments. This is because like white has like a heavy like sort of like spirituality sometimes, where it's like the idea of like there is stuff that is not tangible but is like persistent in terms of like effect, like the soul or something. But also the idea that enchantments represent like white sort of laws and rule making as like a non-physical force that has an over like a lasting effect on the game as long as it stays in play. So there's that too. And white plays a lot of enchantments. So once again, we have like that sort of like funny dichotomy where like white is like the color that cares like one of the two colors that cares the most about enchantments, and because of that, it has like the most options to deal with enchantments, because that's something that it has like an understanding and can approach very well. Is like the idea of like laws and rules and sort of like these intangible like ideas and effects that are still in play, and how to remove them. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target opponent player controls. So this is one thing white gets a lot of, where it's the idea of like it wants to reward you for going wide. So the more creatures you have, and then there's more +1/+1 counters on the board on your side. And just the idea that like white wants you to go wide, so instead of putting like all your counters on one creature, it wants to spread them out. Enduring Innocence. One generic, two white. So I guess the Enduring Innocence here, the reason it was picked for in white is because white has this idea of like a objective morality, a good and a bad. And innocence is part of that. The idea that like innocence is an inherently good thing or moral thing to be, which I guess heavily leans to white themes. Because like white, I mean, because a color like black might just see in this innocence as just being gullible or stupid or unaware, but white might see it as like something worth protecting sometimes. Enchantment creature, Sheep Glimmer, lifelink. Whenever more other creatures you control with power 2 or less enter, draw a card. This ability triggers once each turn. So white caring about like low power creatures, because once again, once you go wide, so making tokens and stuff are usually going to be 1/1s in white. white does have card draw effects. There's been like a lot of talk about like white and card draw. Um, so at the moment, white all the colors have ways of drawing cards, right? Blue has the most ways of drawing cards. Green is reliant on specifically on creatures. Black usually needs to pay a life or sacrifice something to draw cards. Red usually gets impulse draw, or like which is like exiling and you can play till the end of turn, or like discard and draw. Like you discard a card to draw an effect. White at the moment is mostly just either A, it's a catch up effect where if an opponent has more cards than you, then you get to draw a card like as a way to catch up and equal the playing field and playing to that theme of balance. Or B, it's like you draw one card each turn, which is just I think just meant to represent like white, kind of like being a bit more slow sometimes and a bit like rigid in its philosophy in a way. Like it's because like I said, white has believes in objective morality of some sort, which can sometimes manifest as sort of rigidness or unwillingness to change as like a negative quality because it's like a very black and white view of the world, good and evil, don't do bad things. So I think this is represented in how it can only like how these days it can only like draw like one card at a time, barring certain circumstances. Um, and I say one card at a time, I don't mean like literally one card for that entire turn. I mean like each instance is like one card at a time. So like for example, if you have like multiple enduring innocence on the battlefield, obviously if whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters, you draw 4 cards or something. When Enduring Innocence dies, if it was a creature, returns to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment. It's not a creature. 2/1. So this is like more because like the flavor of the like the glimmers on Duskmourn, like the idea that they represent like sort of ideas and hope. So even if you destroy them, the hope that birthed them still exists. But also, I guess you could tie it to white specifically too, because like the idea that even if it dies or you sacrifice it, it still carries on as a sort of enchantment or idea. Um, and that's like one of the advantages that white does sometimes have, where it's like white leans so heavily to structures in the group that sometimes there isn't like because like black wants to consolidate power, right? Black is saying I want to be the one calling the shots, so I want to consolidate the power. The disadvantage to that line of thinking sometimes is that you only have like one or two locuses of power, and if that power gets taken out, then like your group is just like has no direction or leader, and will probably just result to like just devolve into either infighting or just completely dissolving. White is trying to like put in like complex structures in place and like leaders and hierarchies to make sure that even if you take out like one guy, the structure is still working. Knight of Grace, one generic, one white. Creature, human knight, first strike. So white gets first strike because it represents a sort of discipline and like martial trading, and the idea of like white caring about a lot about order, but also because first strike can be a very good defensive tool, and white wants like protect you and its creatures. So it's like the idea that your creature can swing in safely, but also that it's like a good blocker. So like if someone attacks your creature will hit first and save itself. Um, Red also gets first strike, but in Red's case, it usually represents a sort of like impulsiveness and like quick, like being really quick to act. Like swing first, ask questions later. Um, in Black, rarely gets first strike. I think it's usually just the only time I can think of it getting first strike is like as like a counterpart to White or a cycle. I guess the reason Black would get first strike would be similar to the reason Red gets it, where it's just like swing first, ask questions later, do what it takes to win. We didn't check. First strike. We'll just check here, see what's up. Yeah, so first strike. So I think it represents like a certain ruthlessness of just being willing to swing, ask questions later. Who cares? I didn't realize Mai had first strike. I played against Mai yesterday. They did not swing with her at all, so I just didn't think about it. United Battlefront. 3 generic, 1 white. Sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to two non-creature non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest of the bottom of your library in in a random order. So white caring about enchantments and artifacts and putting them on the battlefield, but they're below a certain size because it wants you to go wide. There's also versions of this card that like care about creatures, like putting some like creatures with mana value 3 or less, which again, just white going wide when you care about small stuff that work together to create like a bigger threat or horde. The Abzan forces rally to the call, driving back Sarkhan's Feral Dragon Horde. Next up is my other enemy color, green. Green has their own dangerous ideas, the most problematic being the concept of destiny. Destiny says you can't have the things you want because they aren't meant for you. According to who? Green, apparently. Green, through the concept of destiny, is the arbiter of what is supposed to be and what isn't supposed to be. Much like white's morality, things that work for green's benefit are what's destined to be. Meanwhile, the things that I want are an abomination of nature. God forbid you want to make a fucking Frankenstein zombie corpse. God forbid you're a fucking zombie. But it gets worse. A core part of Green's concept of nature is the idea of survival of the fittest. This idea says that evolution of nature is about the strongest surviving. Okay, it's a bit more complicated than that. I have some like bones to pick with like the common interpretation of survival of the fittest. So survival of the fittest does not mean strongest. It means whatever trait helps you survive. So survival of the fittest could actually mean weaker and smaller, but if it helps you survive, then that's survival of the fittest. So for example, there might be like a really big creature, and then suddenly like a meteor hits, wipes out the dinosaurs, and now there's ash blocking the sky. And creatures who are smaller and faster can find places to hide away from both the environment and the predators. But creatures who are bigger and stronger are more likely to die in that situation because they need more food, they need to sustain their size, and they can't move as fast and they can't hide in as many places. So I would argue that like this sort of portrayal of survival of the fittest as being like the strongest, the one who kills the most people, is a very overly simplistic view of what evolution actually is. Because it's actually a lot more complicated. Survival of the fittest literally just means whatever helps you survive. That can mean being stupid. That can mean being dumber. That can mean being faster. That can mean being weaker. Because if you don't have to worry about like, for example, maintaining a massive brain or a complex brain, that's less nutrients your body takes up and has to burn to maintain that. Which could help you survive within certain circumstances. Okay, so if I get in a fight with someone and I kill them, aren't I the strongest? Didn't I survive instead of them? No, I'm usurping the natural order. I'm disrupting the web of life. But if a bear kills a stag, that's fine. That's nature being nature. You can see the bias. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on. I mean, there's an argument for that, but also, like, again, I think the example of survival of the fittest here is being overly simplistic. Another challenge with Green is that most of their creatures act more on instinct than intellect. Sometimes you can scare them, but it's hard to appeal to their selfish nature. So they can be trickier to motivate than other colors. Selfish might be the wrong word because because black by its own admission is selfish. I guess that's to say that like they don't like it's this idea that like they don't want to go above their station in a way. Like you're not gonna appeal to like a guy who just wants to eat meat in a cave all day. So it has no concept of money, for example, because money is like a social construct, and Green's all about like just accepting the world for as it is, which means like sometimes accepting that money is a thing, but also sometimes it's just like, why do we need money? Like money doesn't grow on trees. We don't need money. That's a concept we made up. So that kind of idea. Another challenge with Green is that most of their creatures act more on instinct than I'm a big advocate of death, and Green is the only other color that truly appreciates death. Although it seems scared to use its tool. Green has a level of ferocity that I admire, and is more willing than most to do what it takes to get what it wants. So that theme of death is like in Black's case, the theme of death is like the idea that you're using whatever it takes to win, including killing people or using death or like, using zombies or whatever. In the case of Green also has like a bit of a death theme. It does sacrifice like on rare occasion and care about stuff in the graveyard and milling. But the idea is that Green is more about like the cycle of life and death. It's about appreciating the cycle of life and death and then playing into it or seeing the good in it and being able to use that to your advantage. One thing Black and Green also I guess have in common is Green sometimes has like a massive emphasis on tradition and understanding the world, the way the world is or the way the world was, and using tradition into just like using tradition as a way to understand like how things should be. And Black is willing to use tradition as a way to like exert power in some instances, and to like keep people in their place. Bioengineered future. This is a very funny card to put for. This is a very funny like Green's all about like not changing like. So Green So Green is okay with change, but what Green is against is change it deems unnatural, and that's the core of the thing, right? And what is considered natural and unnatural varies not only from color, but also even within the Green alignment, people can have different ideas of what is natural and unnatural change. For example, for some Green characters, building a city is obviously unnatural, but to other Green characters, that might be a natural process. In the same way that like a beaver building a dam is a natural a part of nature that exists. So I might see, for example, humans building like cities as like a natural like extension of that. Of course, Green's like more about like living in harmony with nature and not like polluting it or usurping it or whatever. But bioengineered future, 1 generic, 2 green. Enchantment. When this enchantment enters, create a lander token. It's an artifact with 2 generic. Tap. Sacrifice this token. Search your library for a basic land card. Put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Each creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it for each land that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So Green cares a lot about lands. Just the idea of that cares a lot about like the world as it is, which means all the lands or biomes that can appear naturally. You know, islands, plains, swamps, mountains, forests. But green also has like a weird like WUBRG theme, where like green is a color that has the most support for playing as many colors as possible, and that just comes from the idea that green is all about accepting the world for as it is, which means accepting that even people with divergent philosophies, or that the other colors can have a place in the world, or that you cannot always change their mind or change them. So this idea that green's like the color that's most likely to accept that and not try to change it or stamp it out, and thus is more likely to have like support for playing a bunch of different colors. Defiant Survivor, 2 generic, 1 green. Creature Human Survivor, Survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, the Defiant Survivor is tapped, Manifest Dread. Look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one into the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature, and the other into your graveyard. Turn it face up anytime to mana cost if it's a creature card. The dark should be scared of me. So this is just green, like survival. Because black is just talking about survival the fittest down here, so Defiant Survivor. Doing what it takes to survive as in a green way. High Stride, 1 green, instant. Target creature gets +1/+3 and gains reach until the end of turn. Untap it. It takes a moment to find your creature's stride, but once you do, you'll feel like a giant. Briscoe River Guide. So green doesn't get a lot of flyers. I think it's mostly just for balancing reasons, because green also gets a ton of big creatures and +1/+1 counters. So green also getting flying would be consistently, at least. It does get flying like on a rare occasion, like with certain green dragons. But green getting like flying consistently would be absurd, because you just have a giant like, you know, Dread Maws coming in with like a +1/+1 flying. So green doesn't usually get flying consistently, but as like a trade-off, it gets reach, so it can defend itself against flyers very well. I don't think there's like too strong of a flavor reason for why green doesn't get flying, other than maybe like flying can represent like a sort of elusiveness and evasiveness that like, you know, blue, white, and black are more willing to lean into to like sneak past their enemies and hit them within the game of Magic. But even then, I think that might just be a stretch. I think it's mostly mechanical. Nature's Rhythm, X generic 2 green, sorcery. Search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Harmonize. Generic X, 4 green mana. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its harmonized cost. You may tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by an amount of generic mana equal to its power, then exile the spell. So part of this is because the harmonized mechanic is like the teamer, and the teamer are green, blue, red. So it's like the idea of green cares about creatures, so you can tap it, and then blue has ways of casting instant sorceries from the graveyard, and then ways of reducing the cost of that kind of stuff. This is very simple. Green just cares about creatures, because creatures are naturally occurring things, so it puts it onto the battlefield for free. Tapestry Warden. So here's an example of an artifact creature of a robot soldier. And once again, like I said, green is not inherently like, I'm a caveman bashing every computer I see because technology evil. Green can see certain forms of technology as either natural or living in harmony with nature. So Tapestry Warden. 3 generic, 1 green. Artifact creature, robot soldier. Vigilance. Each creature you control with toughness greater than its power assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than power. Each creature you control with toughness greater than its power stations permanents using its toughness rather than its power. Tricks never leave the world's defenseless. So it also is Tapestry Warden, so I'm wondering if there's like maybe a connection to tradition there a little bit with that robot, and the idea that it's protecting like traditional, like a, you know, sacred old traditional homelands, and thus it is green. But there's also like Vigilance, which is like when you swing it as in tap, which is just, you know, green caring about creatures and a lot of creature-based keywords. And I guess also the idea that creature just has like a lot of vigor, and it might just keep going. And toughness, because sometimes green and white both assign like toughness instead of power, which is the idea of like, I guess, using how big the creature is to your advantage, or using like defense, turning a good defense into an offense. Next up are my ally colors. I'll start with red. What I really enjoy about red is that it is the color of action. If red wants something, they will do something about it. Red doesn't sit and complain when life doesn't go their way. They figure out what needs to be done, and they do that. One of my least favorite things is when people complain that their life isn't going the way they want it to, and don't take steps to make it better. Red doesn't do that. Red has a drive and passion unlike any other color. Red is also not afraid to make use of tools available to them. For example, red is good at destroying things. Yeah, it can damage creatures and destroy artifacts. It can't destroy enchantments. The flavor being that like red is very like bodily and emotional, and the idea that red's acting on like a lot of like emotion instinct. So with artifacts, you're like, ooh, there's artifact. I smash it with hammer, right? But with enchantments aren't like a physical thing you can always smash directly. So it's like red's like, oh, I can't immediately interact with it, so I'm not really gonna worry about it, kind of deal. And red also like just does damage, so it can hurt a lot of creatures. Don't get me wrong, but certain creatures have like indestructible and stuff that make it hard to destroy, or if not impossible, with like just raw damage. So that represents the idea also that, like, red's a bit like straightforward sometimes, where it's like, I'm gonna shoot you with fire until you fall over, and if that doesn't work, whatever, I'm just gonna keep shooting with fire or do whatever I want to do. Sometimes red does have like, can create like -1/-1 counters as like damage that's so powerful, like it just weakens you until you die. But um red doesn't do that. Red has a drive. Red is also not afraid to make use of the tools available to them. For example, red is good at destroying things. Most of the colors shy away from destruction, as it's something to be ashamed of. Red recognizes their strengths and isn't afraid to use them. Red also understands that getting what you need sometimes comes at the expense of others standing in your way. If you become an obstacle for red will remove you. Red also understands the importance of enjoying life, living to its fullest, and taking the time to savor what you have. What's the point of getting what you want if you can't enjoy it? So that's a pretty good overlap between black and red, is the idea that you should put yourself first in a certain way. So the difference, okay, hold on. My biggest problem with red is they're a bit reckless even for my taste. I understand taking risks, but they need to be calculated risks. Red is often short-sighted in a way that's problematic in the long term. I'm not against indulging one's impulses, but you have to keep your logic goal in mind. Red has a bad habit of doing something one day that causes problems the next day. Also, red is also less selfish than black, which is another thing they can disagree on. Red is all about emotion, right? So red is usually red is usually kind of like inherently selfish, but there can be situations where, for example, if red has someone it really cares about, red is like, I want to sacrifice myself to save that person, because red is operating on emotion, like from love and etc. and stuff like that, instead of like from what black would consider a more logical perspective. So red can be a bit like self-sacrificing in a way that black does not like sometimes. Um, One thing you also notice, like, for example, color combinations like black and red is like, sometimes black and red are manifests as a sort of hedonism, where it's like black's willingness to do whatever you want and be in charge and have say over your own life, and then red's like combination of like, do whatever you enjoy, and it's combining with like black's like idea of step on whoever you need to step on to get what you want, which in black red can sometimes manifest as like sort of like a reckless hedonism, where it's just like red's emotional, I want to do what makes me happy or do what brings me joy, and then black sort of do whatever it takes, even if you have to like shit on other people to do it. Boo Mobile, too generic, too red. Artifact vehicle. When this vehicle enters, add 4 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. Exhaust. X generic, too generic, 1 red. This vehicle deals X damage to any target. Put a +1/+1 counter on this vehicle. Activate each exhaust ability only once. So you could see exhaust as being maybe a bit red in certain ways, where it's like you can use it once, and then it didn't think far enough ahead to think about like trying to ever use exhaust again. There are ways in other colors to bounce, like Boomobile, for example. So you could keep exhausting, you could bounce it and then Boomobile, exhaust again. But on its own, it's like, you could see this as a sort of short-sightedness. It's like you only get to use it once, and after that, you're not using it again. Generous Plunderer, 1 generic, 1 red. Creature Human Rogue, Menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may create a treasure token. When you do, target opponent creates a tapped treasure token. Whenever Generous Plunderer attacks, it deals damage damage to defending player equal to the number of artifacts they control. So one thing black and red do have in common is they sometimes have like a really strong treasure theme, and that usually just represents greed, basically, which is like black money is a form of power, so black wants a lot of money and thus treasure and gold and riches, and red, there is an emotional component to money where it's like money can let you buy what you want, and then the idea of I just want it because it's shiny and it gives me power. Here it's kind of interesting because it's like a generous plunder and they give you a bit of treasure even if there's a cost, so that's kind of funny. But invasive maneuvers, 1 generic, 1 red. Instant. Invasive maneuvers deals 3 damage to target creature. It deals 5 damage instead if you control a spacecraft. So red is dealing damage. It saves a lot on ammunition. No, I'm not kidding. Captain Mayav, Cavaron Memorial Navy. So here we have. I guess it's funny because invasive maneuvers and it's invasive, not evasive. That's funny. But it's smashing through a ship, and it's the idea that red being straightforward, just dealing damage. And if you have a bigger spaceship, you can smash the spaceship into a target. Rapacious Dragon. I think Rapacious is like greedy, so greedy. I think. Yeah. So once again, red and black both have like themes of like greed and just taking what you want when you want it. 4 generic, 1 red. Creature Dragon. Flying. When this creature enters, create 2 treasure tokens. Artifacts with tap, sacrifice this token, add 1 mana of any color. Surely I won't notice if I take Theory the Sly. Last words. Yeah. Witch Stalker Frenzy. 3 generic, also red, gets a lot of dragons because dragons. It's mostly, I think, just like because dragons have fire, and fire has like this elemental, like classic elemental association with like emotion and the body. Like classical elements, I mean like fire, water, air, and earth. Air and water are usually like quote unquote higher elements within like alchemical thought, and they're connected to like the mind and the soul. And then fire and earth are more like basic, base stuff, as in like emotion and the body and bodily instinct. And fire has a stronger association with that kind of stuff, and also helps contrast blue, which blue is like has a heavy like water theme, and that and also heat has a strong association with emotions. Like if you say my blood is boiling, you're saying like you're feeling a very strong emotion. In that case, anger. Um, so and even like electricity, like the atmosphere was electric with excitement. Like so, it was like electricity and fire and their association with like emotions. And in contrast, cold and like ice are usually representative of a lack of emotion or lack of like obvious display of emotion. Display, what the fuck? Obvious display of emotion. So if someone gives you the cold shoulder, they're being very cold and emotionless or shrugging you off. If someone's cold and calculating, you're saying they don't show a lot of emotion. Witchstalker Frenzy. 3 generic, 1 red. Instant. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature that attack this turn. Witchstalker Frenzy deals 5 damage to target creature. The Witchstalkers circle the armored figure, drawn to the corrupting stink of dark magic. Kellen and Ruby fled the sound of savage howls and snapping jaws. So Witchstalker Frenzy, so they're just falling into like a frenzy, like they're giving into their emotions, and they deal 5 damage to something. Cost 1 less for each creature that attack this turn. So it's kind of interesting because it can be used both defensively and offensively. Where it's like if you're attacking, then the flavor would probably be that like you're giving into the frenzy and attacking, and then if your opponent's attacking, it's like you're taking advantage of like the frenzy being caused by their attacking you, and then you can kill something. My other ally is blue. I adore how much blue thinks everything through. Like me, blue has a plan. Blue has figured out what it wants and takes several steps to get it. Unlike red, blue never makes a move without calculating the ripples it will create. Blue is often more thorough than me, although that comes at the cost of being a little slower at advancement than I'm happy with. Blue also understands the power of knowledge. Part of being victorious is understanding the weaknesses of those in your way. Blue understands that knowledge is power and is great at figuring out how to defeat someone in an unexpected way. Blue is underhand, so an example of this within the game would be something like flash or counter spells, like instance, for example. Blue is very good at casting things during your opponent's turn, like catching them off guard, because the idea is that it was planning ahead. So it rewards you for planning ahead and leaving mana open to do that kind of stuff. Blue is underhanded, sneaky, and manipulative. Yeah, blue has a lot of has a lot of can't be blocked effects, ways of like making things unblockable. Literally taking control of your opponent's permanents and creatures by using information to control them. I say all of this in the most positive way. Blue doesn't fall for white's morality scam. Blue does what blue needs to do. I also admire, which is kind of funny because blue's ally comes with whites, so it's a very funny perspective on blue. I also admire blue's use of other resources. Blue realizes that there are limitations to what it can do, and it has spent a lot of time finding new tools, techniques, and secrets that allow it to accomplish its goals. My main criticism of blue would be that they're a little too caught up in reaching the ideal. There's a gap between what gets the job done and the best possible outcome. I'm all about practicality. If something works, I'm happy. Blue always aims for the optimal outcome, and that slows it down. Also, blue is not willing to take risks, something that is often necessary. Blue values something being right over it being good enough. Yeah, so blue, the phrase Mark uses to represent blue is perfection through knowledge. And it's not that blue literally cares about literally being perfect all the time. It's the idea that blue is striving to be as close to perfect as possible by, using knowledge and information and taking your time. Which can make blue a very slow color within the game. But here we see that exploration of like the idea of that being like a flaw sometimes, where it's like sometimes it is good to take your time, but sometimes your blue can be a little bit perfectionist. Basically, being perfectionist is not always a good trait. Sometimes it can be bad and get in the way. Another conflict blue and black have, I believe, is that black has more things it's willing to do to get the job done. Like black believes that there is no like, as long as it gets the job done, there is no good or bad, right? But blue is like, hey, we shouldn't. Blue has like lines in the sand that it won't cross. We're saying like, hey, we shouldn't do this because that's like the net effect is a negative one. And black is more willing to like, hey, I will screw over like the good of the group if it gets me where I want to be. Where blue still wants to create a net positive, and it has things it will not do because it still doesn't want to. It still wants to create an overall better world. And black, I guess, in its own way, black does want to create a better world, but as long as it wants to create a world that's better for it at the end of the day, better for the individual, as opposed to like everyone necessarily, or like because like Black was just talking about earlier how like not everyone can win. So Black is like more about creating a world that's better for it as opposed to a world that's better for like literally everyone. Blue and White lean more towards the idea I want to create a world that's better for everyone. Um, Aetherize, 3 generic, 1 blue, instant. Return all attacking creatures to their owner's hands. You can come back once you've learned some manners and figure out how to reconstitute your physical form. So blue having a lot of bounce effects. What's the idea of like sort of outsmarting something, and it also plays into blue's like mechanic, like blue wanting to stall for time, because like I said, blue wants to play slow. Blue rewards you for playing slow, drawing cards, gaining knowledge, and then coming up with a way to defeat your opponent over time. So blue gets a lot of bounce effects, which helps stall for time. Because like it doesn't destroy the creature, but because blue shies away from destroying things as often because they might prove useful later. But the idea that like you swing, I bounce all your stuff, so now if you want to attack me, it's like gather all your forces again and then swing at me again, which may give me enough time to come up with a plan and draw enough cards to figure out a countermeasure anyway. Harbinger of the Tides, 2 blue, creature merfolk wizard. You may cast a spell as though it had flash if you play two generic more to cast it. When this creature enters, you may return target attack creature and opponent controls to its owner's hand. 2/2. So once again, flash because blue planned ahead and can play things suddenly, and then also it can return things to your hand. Also, blue can tap, which once again, I mean, this is not tapping it. This is just returns a tapped creature. But blue cares about tapping things generally because the idea that it's stalling for time while it figures out a plan. Micromancer, 3 generic, 1 blue. I just love that name, Micromancer. 3 generic, 1 blue. Creature, human wizard. When this creature enters, you may search your library for an instant or sorcery card with mana value 1 or less. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Ideas don't always have to be big to be great. 3/3. So once again, we have some emphasis on blue being sort of perfectionist, where like even small things can matter, and have big ripple effects. So here it is getting a very small spell that can still make all the difference. And blue tends to care about like non-creature spells a lot, just like the idea that it has mastered magic in such a way that like, or cares about mastering magic and understanding it, that it cares a lot about instants and sorceries, because that's like the rawest display of magic. Also enchantments to an extent, but white cares more about enchantments. It also cares about artifacts because artifacts are obviously something that is artificial that can be used to, alter yourself or do something or help you do something that you couldn't do alone or before. Sabotage Strategist, 2 generic, 2 blue. Creature Vedalken Ranger. Flying Vigilance. Whenever one or more creatures attack, those creatures get -1/-0 at the end of turn. Exhaust. 5 generic, 2 blue. Put 3+1/+1 counters on this creature. 2/2. So blue has been getting Vigilance recently. I've seen it. I haven't seen people talk about it lately, but I remember people being confused as to why blue gave Vigilance. And Mark already gave his reasoning back in like his really old like 2021 Mechanical Color Pie article. Blue can already tap and untap creatures like on a whim very easily, so Vigilance is just like a representation of that in a more simplified way, where it's like instead of untapping this creature doesn't get tapped in the first place if you swing with it. So that kind of idea. Blue gets a lot of flyers because flying has association with like the air, the elements of air, as we talked about previously, but also like sort of evasiveness. And blue doesn't get -1/-1 effects; it gets like -1/-0 effects, where it's like it can lower something's attack power, which can help catch your opponent off guard, but also stall for time without like just destroying stuff. And that's one thing I think it's also represented very well in blue's like mechanical gameplay, is that like destroying a creature is very straightforward and in a lot of ways like really useful. But blue wants you to blue was trying to get you to play smart, basically, right? So instead of always taking like the most straightforward, I'll destroy something, it's like I will outsmart my opponent. I'll trick them into trying to play a creature over and over. That kind of stuff. Stillness in Motion. 1 generic, 1 blue. Enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill 3 cards. Then if your library has no cards in it, exile this enchantment and put 5 cards from your graveyard on top of your library in any order. So blue does care about the library a lot because it cares about information. So it can either mill the library of yourself or opponents to represent, robbing someone of information that they can use against you, or you can mill yourself to try to as a way to help search for stuff or to get rid of information. Blue has ways of winning the game if you have no cards in your library. Normally, if you run out of cards in your library and you try to draw a card, you just lose. But the idea with blue is that you can either circumvent that because you've gone through your library, you've gone through literally every option, so now you have an answer. So you either just win or you don't lose anyway. It can also like put stuff back into your library as a way to like looking for more answers or reusing answers that you used previously. It has like a lot of shrine like reordering of cards, so like organizing your information and what you're willing to use. The Meditation Realm is a willful puzzle. Seek and and it will impede. Wait, and it will permit passage. Um, so kind of like one of those. Sounds like one of those like finger traps where it's like you get like the finger trap, the finger cuffs or whatever, and like the point is that you need to push to get it to get it off. You need to push your fingers together, which is like the idea is that it's like not your first instinct. It's things stuck in your hands. Your first instinct will be to pull it off. Now that I've talked about the other colors, it's time to talk about my greatest strengths and weaknesses. My greatest strength is my ability to see opportunities. I'm incredibly focused and ruthless when it comes to getting what I want. Every other color has rules for why they won't do certain things. I do none of that. I don't create limitations. If something will help me get what I want, I'm willing to use it. I have no taboos. I have no qualms. I have no hesitations. I have no mercy. I simply know what I am and I'm willing to do what needs to be done. There are two reasons I can do this. First, I am not attached to anything. To get what you want, you often must give up something else of value. I will do that every time. If giving up something gets me something that I need, I'll give up what I must, even if it took a lot of time to acquire. My sacrifices are just stepping stones to something else. Second, I'm willing to take risks. To win, you must be willing to lose. My risks are always calculated, but I'm willing to embrace the possibility of losing things dear to me in my quest for power. This, of course, leads me to my biggest weaknesses. Things won't always work out for me. Some risks won't go my way, and that can lead to some major setbacks. So this is represented in the game. Like I said, black has like a lot of sacrifice effects. Pay life to get something, sacrifice creatures, and those are risks because if you for example pay 2 life and sacrifice creature to draw 2 cards, those cards might not be what you need to win, and they can also fuck you over because maybe paying all that life over the course of the game is now you're at like 1 life. And then you just get like, I don't know, lightning bolted or a creature like sneaks in and hits you for 1, right? Or maybe you sacrifice 1 too many creatures, so now you don't have enough blockers when you should have kept them up. So there's that kind of aspect to black's mechanics where like you should be taking risks, you should be doing whatever it takes to win, use whatever resource you can, but that can backfire if you're not careful or if you just didn't predict something going a certain way. Um, my willingness to mess with forces that no other color can sometimes backfire. With risk comes reward, but also punishment. I understand that my ways might sound harsh, but I'm the only color that prioritizes getting what you need and want. Every other color will try to get you to settle and tell you that it's okay to not have all the things you want. But why? You only get 1 life and there's only 1 you. So this is like very like overlapping with red a lot, where red's like the idea that you only have 1 life, so you should just take what you want when you want it as much as possible because you only have 1 life, so you might as well enjoy it. And you know, yeah. So there's nothing wrong with each person being their own champion. If you don't look out for yourself, who will? Thanks for listening. I hope what I had to say hits home. So Avenger of the Fallen, 2 generic, 1 black, creature, human, warrior. That touch. Mobilize X, where X is the number of creatures cards in your graveyard. Whenever this creature attacks, create an X tapped and attacking 1/1 red creature warrior creature token. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So cares about sacrificing, but black can go white sometimes. And the idea that it's avenging some sort of fallen person, but also dead touch. Chorale of the Void, 3 generic, 1 black. Enchantment Aura. Enchant creature you control. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, put target creature card from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. So once again, bring something back from the graveyard to use to your advantage as a resource. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice this aura unless a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn. High Society Hunter, 3 generic, 2 black. Creature, vampire noble. Flying. Whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So once again, a very straightforward example of like willing to sacrifice your other people or allies or somebody else to get something else more power. Or I guess in this case, it would be this creature sacrificing something else so that this creature can have more power with a +1/+1 counter. Also has a flying as like a sort of like evasiveness and trickiness. Whenever another non-token creature dies, draw a card. So another example of like black drawing you a card whenever you sacrifice something. Like it gets you some sort of information or something. You've been a marvelous servant. Consider this your final assignment. Ruthless Negotiation. 1 black. Sorcery. Target opponent exiles a card from their hand. If this spell is cast in the graveyard, draw a card. Flashback. 4 generic, 1 black. Next time you come this way, do us both a favor and have something worth the stealing, yeah? So, once again, black messing with the mind and in this case, I guess stealing an opponent. Stealing something and throwing it away. So, by exiling something from your hand, and also can draw you a card if you cast it from your graveyard. Unscrupulous Agent, 1 generic, 1 black. Creature, elf, detective. When unscrupulous agent enters the battlefield, target opponent exiles a card from their hand. Obtaining evidence through the proper channels can take weeks of paperwork. Sometimes justice can't wait. 1/1. So once again, exiling a card from someone's hand, doing whatever it takes to win. And that, I believe, is all for today. So thank you for stopping by, even if you're just watching the VOD or you only stop by for like 5 minutes or 2 seconds. Next time I'm gonna cover In My Words Red. So get ready for that. Next time I'll cover it'll be next weekend, Saturday at 2, like usual. I know currently I'm on Thanksgiving break, but I'm gonna keep the same schedule just so I have time to work on other stuff. Both final projects, but also I have some like club stuff I gotta work on. So I will